goal or the mission of the Cattywampus Puppet Council at this point in time is to cultivate community and promote play through the puppetry arts, through puppets. And those two missions, that kind of simultaneously, this desire to strengthen the community in Knoxville as well as play, go hand in hand. And you know, those were missions, I think, for us that came about really early on in what we were doing. I'm Rachel Milford, and I'm a co-founder of the Cattywampus Puppet Council. We started making together in the summer of 2014, not necessarily knowing that we were going to grow into an arts organization yet, but that's really when we started. Spring of 2015 was when we kind of put our first show together. We get asked a lot about the name. We made a couple puppet heads and started taking them out on the street. The grandma and grandpa were our first. We just took them out busking and having fun and that sort of thing. And then when we were asked to start doing shows, we were like, well, we need a name. Who are we? So for us, that conversation really boiled down to this idea that we wanted to be rooted in this community. And the word cattywampus really appealed to us, first of all, because it is a Southern colloquialism, but also because this idea of something being cattywampus. So cattywampus means, you know, a little off kilter, a little awry, not quite perfect. My background was in theater. I grew up in Knoxville and was really active in theater when I was in middle and high school and into college. But in college, I got more into visual art and started doing painting and sculpting and printmaking and things. And it was after college I moved to Olympia, Washington, to do an AmeriCorps position there. And there's a pretty rich puppetry community there. They also do a really awesome, gigantic puppet parade, kind of in a similar vein to what we're hoping to do this spring, called the Procession of the Species. It's a big community-based art project. And I think getting to be in that parade, as well as meeting other puppeteers in Olympia, all of a sudden I found myself kind of fascinated by this process that for me was a way to bring together like that love for the performing arts, as well as that love of making and the visual arts. And the big puppets in particular, I felt really attracted to because of this extra element of collaboration that was involved in them. Making a big puppet is not really something you want to do by yourself. It takes way too much time. You would get very frustrated, you know, 10 hours into the paper mache process. And so it kind of lends itself to the collaborative art of making and to community building through that. The origin of these style giant puppets and parade puppets is really rooted, at least in the US, in a gentleman named Peter Schumann. Peter Schumann founded a group called Bread and Puppet in the early 60s in New York. There were other groups that were doing this style of art at the same time in Europe and other countries. Certainly big parade style puppets there's a lineage that goes back further than that as well, but the sort of resurgence of making in this way was really catalyzed by Peter Schumann, and Bread and Puppet was using this style of art as something they could take to the streets, that they could use for pop-up street performances and for protests, a lot of social justice activism work, because it was big, right? It drew attention to it. The word puppet, you know, puppet is used in so many different forms. It's even a metaphor that we use often to kind of describe people that can have negative connotations sometimes. A puppet is really just an inanimate object that we bring to life. And so, you know, we go back to the Punch and Judy style days, marionettes, there's sock puppets, hand puppets, all of that. And the big puppets, kind of these giant parade puppets, are their own sort of genre within that too. My generation grew up on puppets. We grew up on Jim Henson and the Muppets, the Labyrinth, and Pee-wee's Playhouse. We didn't have as much animated and certainly like Pixar TV. So there's a lot of nostalgia around that. You know, and when we started doing the big puppets, I think we would get all sorts of reactions to them. So some people would see them and just like the sheer size of them is just sort of awe-inducing and, you know, playful and exciting. And then some people think they're kind of creepy. They look very static here sitting behind me, but when people are bringing them to life, whether you're wearing a helmet and embodying that with your movement, or you have like our big Dolly Parton that people have seen around town, you know, and she's moving and her arms are moving around. It's a little creepy. It's a little, you know, it's a little strange to see an art object brought to life, but it's also simultaneously very magical, right? And very whimsical. We're offering a bunch of free workshops for people to come and learn some of the skills and techniques that we use and get inspired to make their own big creations, masks and costumes and things for the parade. We're also working with a lot of local community groups and helping them build things. One of the things I love about this medium is you don't have to go down to the art store and buy $300 in oil paints. You don't have to buy a bunch of canvas. You can honestly go to your recycling bin and probably the dump and get about everything that you're going to need to make. So this idea of cheap art, that art can be accessible, that we can reuse and recycle with it, that I can make things out of cardboard and bamboo and old house paint that I get at the dump or free foam, things like that. A lot of what we do is based in paper mache, and when you're doing that style of paper mache, you need some sort of armature, just like when you did paper mache when you were a kid and your teacher got out balloons and you put newspaper on that. We use buckets and helmets and all sorts of things to make armatures, and then the paper mache, the style that you see behind me, is usually done with clay. So we'll take clay and we'll lay that on the armature and we'll sculpt out the face, the ears, if it's an animal, the teeth and everything. And the clay is lovely because you get this sort of detail work. And then we'll take that and we'll put a plastic trash bag over the clay, and we'll use paper bags for paper mache. So we're always asking friends and family to save Trader Joe's bags, Whole Foods bags, Kroger bags for us. And we'll use those for paper mache. We'll use like a cornstarch water goop. We try to go to the dump a lot. We go to the hazardous waste dump site that the city has, and we'll get old house paint that people aren't using and use that, as well as acrylics too. And when it comes to making sort of the bodies of a lot of our puppets, we really rely on a lot of, what people throw away too. So we may use old chicken wire. We'll take bed sheets, old bed sheets, and dye those to make costumes and things like that. Using things like bamboo or broken broom handles to make, the arms that hold up, the stick that holds up a hand for a puppet and moves it. So it's all about, for us, as much like reusing as we can, as little purchasing as well. So I tell people, like our big Dolly Parton puppet that's 12, 13 feet tall, my estimate is she probably cost about $50 to build.
Paper bags to tear. It's a very
we just started doing this as a bit of a hobby, and it just sort of started moving itself forward. It has its own life force, and we've been kind of running, behind to catch up, and so it's continuing to sort of unfold and transform, but what I see it growing into, we became a nonprofit. And as a nonprofit, we see ourselves continuing to grow into the community, to be doing more shows, continuing to make this parade hopefully an annual tradition. The idea is, how can we all be working together? How can we be bringing the performing arts to the forefront too in this community? Puppets can do all that. They're a start. They're a start, yeah. And that's why we want more people in the conversation to bring their skills and their talents and gifts.